Quick little disclaimer before we get started. I accidentally stacked my audio outputs
outputs
while recording again, so when you hear two different game audio tracks, that's the reason why. I'm sorry, I promise I fix it later, I'm an idiot, yada yada, let's get going. This is Factorio. You crash land on a planet, mine some rocks, automate some machines, and eventually launch a rocket and leave. Very peaceful, very reasonable, except that's not what the game actually is. At least, not in the way that we'll be playing it. The biters, henceforth known as the environmentalists, are the local wildlife. Normally, the game gives you some breathing room at the start. A safe little buffer zone where you can set up basic infrastructure before the locals start setting up protests. This run will not include that courtesy. We will be playing on maximum enemy settings. This is what the seed would normally look like, and this is what we will be playing with instead. Looks absolutely joyous, right? But we're also aiming to get 6 achievements in one continuous run. Lazy Bastard, which means only up to 111 items can be crafted manually until you launch your first rocket. There is no spoon, which requires launching a rocket in under 8 hours. Rush to space, which means no purple or piss science until you've researched something from a different planet first. Work around the clock and express delivery. Obviously we'll be going for sub 40 hours, so beating it in under 100 is a given. And last but certainly not least, and what I'm most scared about, keeping your hands clean. Which means we cannot destroy a single biter nest until we reach artillery. Which on max enemy settings will certainly be fun? Yeah, I guess fun is a word you could definitely use. Our starting plan is simple. We launch the first rocket in under 8 hours while effectively being a pacifist, then leave Nauvis as soon as possible for Vulcanus. Honestly, from there, I'll probably improvise as we go along, which with this time crunch and difficulty probably isn't for the best, but hey, that's part of the fun, right? Will we overcome the biter menace, or will we crumble before even leaving the planet? Our first run begins, and I don't even get 20 minutes in before I completely forget about Lazy Bastard and handcraft myself a bunch of pipes. Well, that's awesome. Alright, well, take 2 because I forgot about Lazy Bastard. Unfortunate.
Flawless start. At least this happened early on. 15 minutes in is still embarrassing, but not a tragic loss. 6 hours deep would put me 6 feet underground. The first real objective I decided on was simple. Get the mall online. For anybody unfamiliar, a mall is basically the backbone of your starter base. It produces all the basic factory components automatically like inserters and assemblers. Without it, we would be hopeless, even if we weren't going for Lazy Bastard. I copied a small mall blueprint from a previous world and got to work. I hadn't even gotten to research gun turrets yet when the first wave showed up. Honestly, I wasn't expecting them to come barreling in so quickly, so we took a small detour and scraped together just enough iron for a handful of gun turrets. Eventually, the mall came online, and suddenly I wasn't hand-feeding every single expansion. Assemblers started churning to life, and it felt like the factory had grown its first set of legs. With basic production handled, I moved on to proper iron and copper smelting. It wasn't glamorous, but seeing clean, structured smelting arrays felt like progress. At this point, hilariously, power still wasn't automated. We were still running on manually babysat boilers, so automated power was next. Once steam engines were properly fed and stable, I could finally think about reinforcing the perimeter, and this wasn't until nearly 2 hours in. I set up a single assembler to make some walls and started to throw them around the attack points. Not because they would stop the massive waves, but because they would at least make them have to chew through something else first.
Oh, that's unfortunate. Oh, well, that is also very unfortunate. Fantastic, dude.
By now, I had grown accustomed to every Factorio player's favorite sound. You know, at this point, it's kinda just blending in with the ambience. Despite having a proper iron smelter set up for our iron production, it still wasn't enough, so I duplicated the blueprints. Conveniently, enemy wave sizes had also doubled in roughly the same time span. The factory was scaling, and so were the complaints from our dear protesters. Around this point, red and green science were finally automated, which meant we could invest in some much needed damage and firing speed research. Iron demand continued to spiral, so I decided to start upgrading our belts to red, which have twice the throughput as yellow belts. With the throughput increase, we pushed into proper green circuit production, then red circuits. This is where the run quietly became possible, by unlocking modules, specifically efficiency modules. Efficiency modules reduce energy consumption and pollution output by up to 80%, and in a max enemy run where we aren't allowed to destroy nests until artillery, this is a lifesaver. If safety meant that the enemy couldn't smell you, then we were approaching safe. Then came chemical science, which requires oil, and let me tell you, we had access to what I can only describe as a purely decorative patch of oil. Very optimistically, I built infrastructure for 6 refineries. we could barely sustain one refinery at full uptime. The rest of them sat there like expensive paperweights, waiting for crude oil that simply did not exist. Hope, unfortunately, is not a valid fluid in Factorio, and definitely doesn't refine into plastic. Steel was also becoming a problem, because steel requires iron, and iron was already engaged in 12 other full-time positions all over the factory. Chemical science did come online, at the blistering speed of 10 to 20 science per minute. Wow. I mean, hey, technically it is production, right? Medium biters had also begun to spawn, which meant piercing ammo became much more appealing. So I spaghettified an upgrade line together and hoped it would hold. Then, suddenly, the factory went dark. I only initially noticed this because an inserter was taking its sweet time swinging its little arm. After placing some power poles in confusion, thinking I had cut power from the boilers somewhere, I checked the boilers themselves. No water. Steam engines, as it turns out, require water to turn into steam. Quite the revolutionary concept. I replaced the missing pipe and everything came back to life, including the biters gnawing at our walls. Once military science finished and efficiency modules were slotted into everything that mattered, we could start focusing on our final step into getting to space. This would require low density structures, processing units, and rocket fuel. LDS was relatively easy, although admittedly quite copper expensive for our current production. Processing units and rocket fuel, however, were less smooth. Funnily enough, we had plenty of circuits for the processing units. It was the sulfuric acid we were lacking due to having no oil. Production of them was slow, but slow is all we need since we plan to leave and never come back. Rocket fuel was by far the worst component, as every step of its production involved oil. But again, slow production is better than no production, so... The rocket silo itself went down without incident, and after hours of balancing iron shortages, oil starvation, and constant perimeter repairs, we were finally ready to launch our first rocket. And I'll be honest, I did not expect us to get this far. I thought we would have been overrun by the max settings biter expansions hours ago, so launching that first rocket felt absolutely amazing.
We did it, guys. When you get 4 achievements at once.
And with that rocket launch, we knocked 2 achievements off the list. There is no spoon, and lazy bastard. Suddenly there was no more 8-hour timer looming over my head, and we had over 30 hours to complete the rest of the run. On top of that, I was allowed to handcraft items again, which wouldn't be anything game-changing, but a nice quality of life thing to have access to now instead of having to run to an assembler every time I was missing an item. With Nauvis effectively complete, we were ready to begin looking towards the other planets. And to probably nobody's surprise, Vulcanus was our next destination. We launched a few more rockets to make our first spaceship, Red Shadow the boxcar, which is courtesy of Avadi Strategy, and with the spaceship complete, we took off for the great beyond.
What are we working with? I don't have the fucking brain capacity to start this today. At least we made it here. Sub 10 hours. It's nice.
I know this video is a little shorter than it probably could have been, but honestly, if you want to watch early game Factorio, you can probably watch any Factorio video on YouTube and get the exact same experience. That being said, I guess let me know if you'd like to see more. It's my first time giving Factorio content to Whirl, so I'm sure I don't have the pacing down perfect yet. Also, since we're at the end of the video, I guess now would be a great time to mention that this series will be broken up into 5 different parts, one for each of the planets. I do have something that I want to do with this world once we complete this challenge though, and I don't think it exists in Factorio yet. At least none that I've seen on YouTube. Probably because nobody's insane enough to try it, but that's besides the point. We'll cross that bridge when we get there, but in the meantime, let me know what you think. Let me know what works, what doesn't, and anything in between. I'm happy to hear any and all your feedback, and maybe, just maybe, you all can start to watch my Factorio career with great interest. Anyways, that's all for this one. Take care out there, guys.